You just finished reading about variables. Let's go and look at an example, create some variables, and we'll even do some math to those variables so you can see how that works. I'm going to start by creating a new project in Eclipse. I'm going to call this TileCalculator. I'm going to pretend that we're creating a Java program that will take a height or length and a width, multiply them out, and we'll figure out what the total square footage is, and then we'll put in a tile size and we can figure out how many tiles we need. Before we get to that though, we need to create our main class. Go ahead and I'm going to use just the +C. I'm going to pick my tile calculator. It's going to go into my source file. I'm going to call this tile calculator. And you would put your last name, so I'm going to put your last name and then click finish. So right now we have our class, so we'll type everything in to our source code, into our tile calculator your last name.java, and then it will compile it into a class file with the extension .class. And then whenever the program goes to run on the Java virtual machine, it's actually going to load the class file, and it's going to start executing in the main method. So the main method is where your program starts running. Right now we don't have one of those in here. We're going to have to add in our main method. After we create our main method, we need to open it up with our curly brackets and close it after, and everything will go in between those two curly brackets. With all of our Java projects, we're going to make sure that we have a comment and our name. All right, now we're ready to go. We're going to start working with some of those primitive variable types that you learned about in your reading. We're going to start working with ints because it makes sense. I have my measurements here in inches, so there's no decimal points or anything like that. So we're going to start by creating two variables. We're going to have one called length and one called width, and those are going to be integers. And so here is my type, integer, my name, length, and then I'm going to have some assignment. So I know my first measurement is 117 inches, and I want my backsplash to be 18 inches tall. So now I've created my first two variables. Right now I have errors that say you've created these but you haven't used them. So let's create a variable called area in inches, and we'll use these variables. Pretty simple to do mathematical calculations. We can add, subtract, divide, and multiply. So I'm going to take length times width to get my area in inches. Right now, that value is being stored inside the placeholder area in inches. Now, if I go and run this program, nothing happens. Right now, I don't have anything outputting in the program. So I can use a system.out.println, and that will print whatever I decide to print. Ends in a semicolon. Right now, it's not printing anything, but I can put in the name of my variable, and that will print to the console whenever I run it. I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut Command S on a Mac or Control S on a PC to save my Java file, and then all I have to do is click the run button. And you'll see now down here in my console I have 2106 appear. I can also add in text so I can make this more meaningful. And if I want to put in text, I put in 2 double quotes and then a plus sign to attach whatever variables I'm using. So I might write something like area of backsplash is whatever the value is plus the word inches. Because I've done this a lot, I know where I need these spaces at, and you'll get better as you do more of Java programming of where you need these spaces. Now if I save and run, you'll see down here in the console area backsplash is 2106 inches, and that should actually be square inches. There we go. Obviously, I could have just left the number there, 2106, but being able to put in some explanation about what that number is to the console will be more meaningful here in a little bit. So now let's take this number and let's figure out what the square footage is. Right now I have square inches. So in order to find the square footage, I take the area in inches and I divide it by 144. So I'm going to create a new variable called square footage. And I'm going to take area in inches divided by 144, and that's going to store that into that variable. Let's system.out. I'm going to save it and run it. Square foot is 14. Let's do a quick check of the math. We'll pull up a calculator here. Now, if I take 117 times 18, I do get 2106, so that's correct. Now let's find out what we get if we divide this by 144. Well, that is a very different answer than what I actually got. The calculator is saying it should be 14.625, and Java is giving me the square foot is 14. And it actually has to come down to our variable type that we've placed in here. This int is only for integers, so I'm not going to get the decimal places that I need. In order for me to get those, I actually need to change my variable type. You'll see now it just added the 14.0, so just changing it here did not fix the problem because these are integers. I'm actually losing the information much earlier into the program, so I'm going to change these to doubles. Change all of them to doubles. And let's see what kind of information we get now. Square foot is now 14.625. I believe that's what our calculator had on it. Yeah, so we're much closer. Well, we're dead on now that we picked correct data type for our variable. Alright, so now we've got the square footage for our backsplash. Let's consider our tiles now. So I'm going to create a variable, tile length and tile height, and we're going to come up with the tile square footage. We'll use that information to figure out how many tiles are needed. So we'll start by creating two variables, tile length and tile height. For our first example, we're going to say our tiles are 11 3/4 by 11 3/4. Let's use these to figure out the tile square footage. Tile length times tile height is going to give me the square inches, and I'm going to divide that by 144 to get the square feet. Just like in our regular math, where we put our parentheses does matter, so I would want to make sure that I didn't do something like this, because that's going to happen first before it takes it times the length. So pay close attention to that. And now that I've got the tile square footage, let's figure out how many tiles we need. I'm going to use my square footage variable from earlier, and I'm going to divide it by the tile square foot. Finally, anytime that you're going to put in your variable, your string's going, your double quotes, and then a plus sign, and then we put in our variable, tiles needed, and then our double quotes to finish putting in our text. Let's run this and see what we get. All right, we need 15.253961 blah, 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 blah tiles to complete the backsplash. Well, I know from experience that if I go in to Lowe's and tell them that I need 15.2539 tiles, they're going to say, no, you need 16 tiles. So what we need to do is find some way to get that number to be up one. We need to round it up. And Java has a bunch of built-in math functions to make this a little bit easier for us. I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it tiles rounded up. And I'm going to use the math feature called math.ceiling. So math.ceiling. And I can put a double in there. You can see Eclipse is giving me a hint I can put a double in there. Well, I'm in luck because my tiles needed is a double. And I simply just put that variable in there. My variable type is an integer, but this math.ceiling is giving me a double. I can do something called a cast, and we'll work a little bit with cast in this week and next week, where I can cast that number to be an integer, and that will drop the zeros or drop anything on the decimal point. Now I can't do that with doubles. I can't cast to a double, but I can do that with an integer because I'll be removing that extra information. I don't need it, but I can't put in extra information like I would need for the decimal points for a double. So I'm going to change down here to use my new variable, and we'll save and run. And now you can see we need 16 tiles to complete the backsplash, which is absolutely correct. Let me show you what would happen if this was a double instead. I'm going to use my comment just to comment it out. Just going to copy it, paste it, and I'm going to change it to a double. You can see no error there. Save and run it. Now the only difference is it thinks it's a double, so it has that decimal point there at the end. So as you're working with math and variables and different data types, double check to make sure that what you're showing or what you're using is actually realistic. I'm going to keep the int because, again, I'm going to go to Lowe's and I'm going to say I need 16 tiles, not 16.0 tiles. So I hope this is giving you a little bit of a sneak peek into working with Eclipse, working with data types, doing a little bit of some mathematical functions, working with putting in text and variables into our system.outs, doing some minor calculations, and we even got into casting a little bit, which just takes more practice to get used to it. If you have any questions over what we've done or you need help getting your code to work, please let me know.